The Sunday Gospel for the fifth Sunday of Lent is taken from John, chapter 11, verses 1 to 42. And this, of course, is the famous sixth sign of John's Gospel, which is the late raising of Lazarus, a rich narrative that, for our purposes today, have reflections upon the question of human suffering, human death, and also the theodrama of Christ's mission. The narrative begins with Mary and Martha, who are friends of Jesus, sending a petition to him. Their brother Lazarus is ill, and the situation seems to be quite grave, or else they would not have brought this forward to Jesus' attention. We see later in the gospel that in making this petition, Martha was sure that Christ could have done something about this illness. And it is with this hope that the sisters of Lazarus sent a message to Jesus, "Lord, he whom you love is ill." They did not go in person, they sent a message for someone else. The sisters, interestingly, merely informed Jesus of their predicament. And this is interestingly reminiscent of the way that Mary, at the wedding of Cana, Jesus' mother, informed Jesus that the wedding banquet had no wine. This seems to suggest to us that Mary and Martha are giving the form of perfect petition for prayer, asking Jesus to intercede in some manner. So the question now kind of comes for us, how does Jesus respond to this petition? In many ways, it seems less than satisfactory. As it says in the gospel, though Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, after having heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. The usual response, as we're so used to, of someone who loves someone else is one of a certain haste or urgency. Jesus flies in the face of this expectation. Rather than go immediately, he waits 2 days in apparent leisure at his Jordan location. Eventually, he does journey to Bethany, where Lazarus, Mary, and Martha are, only to find that Lazarus has been dead for 4 days, in fact. It is worth noting at this point that there's an early Jewish belief that after death, the soul of the dead person would remain in the tomb or the area of the body for approximately 3 days. And on the fourth day, there would be a complete departure of the soul with no return. Considering that Jesus' purported location in the Jordan at this point was not 2 days' journey away from Bethany, but perhaps only a couple hours away from Bethany, this is perplexing, especially in the light of a complete death. So this means that either Lazarus was already dead when Jesus received the information, which seems unlikely, 2 days, or 2 hours, for a journey doesn't seem very long for someone to be sent, to be on a message. Or Jesus and his disciples not only waited 2 days to go forward to Bethany, but possibly took 2 or more days to actually get to Bethany. This is not exactly haste. It seems to be a leisurely stroll, almost. So the question immediately presents itself. If Jesus loved Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, why was he so maybe nonchalant with Lazarus' life? Jesus himself actually gives the answer, albeit unknown to those who are suffering. He says, as soon as he heard about Lazarus' illness, he said, "This illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, that the Son of God may be glorified through it." That's John 11, verse 4. Against the darkness of suffering and death, Christ speaks his hidden purpose for allowing Lazarus to die. It is for God's glory and Christ's mission and manifestation. According to the Catechism, the glory of God, as understood by the scriptures in the church, is the realization of the manifestation and communication of God's goodness. That's Catechism paragraph 294. And this is actually accomplished by God's omnipotence and his providence. The glory of God in this way is actually an outpouring of God's own good order, setting things right and resolving a cosmic discord into a cosmic harmony. Jesus is promising that in the midst of this apparent illness, God's power and plan will be found in the darkness of human suffering, even unto death. This power is actually soon put into display in an intense, dramatic fashion, thus the theodrama. In the midst of surprising affectivity, Jesus is deeply moved once, and twice greatly disturbed. The literal translation of greatly disturbed in this case is angered by Lazarus' death. Whereas Christ before to the widow of Nain and Jairus' daughter spoke gently to them and raised them from the dead, all of a sudden we see Jesus going on a very dramatic turn of events where he actually says in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." This seems to point forward to Jesus Christ's own deep cry from the cross in the 7th sign of John's Gospel. So therefore, this can be seen as connecting to Christ's own sacrifice and actually being a foreshadowing. And one can almost hear the gasps and sharp exhalations of the crowd as Lazarus comes forth from the tomb. Bound, yes, but alive. So from this reflection, we might find some hope for the current darkness of our lives in this time period. With sudden self-isolation, quarantine, and one could say a poverty of Eucharistic celebration and consumption, this closeness, this physical closeness with our Lord, as well as rising death rates and uncertainty, Martha and Mary's darkness is our own. We too can trust that in the midst of this silence, as Martha and Mary had this silence, they didn't know Jesus' words that were spoken. We too can trust that there is a hidden word on Christ's lips, and that all of this too is permitted for the glory of God. The words of God to Ezekiel in the first reading for today are then also for us. "I am going to open your graves and bring you up from your graves, O my people, and I will bring you back into the land of Israel," which is the promised land. So in the midst of possible despair in this time, possible darkness and possible questioning, uncertainties, anxieties, God's wondrous plans can exceed our own human expectation if we allow him to do so. Thank you.